Cool. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm sure that some people are going to be trickling in over the next few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. I know how valuable your time is. So thank you for joining us today. We don't take you joining us lightly, so we hope you find this helpful and that make the best use of your time here. Again, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from and a little bit about what you're hoping to learn today. On that note, we've already heard from a lot of you and did our best to tailor the content to address your questions. But again, please take the liberty to ask any that you have. There's a little Q&A tab right here in Zoom. And then, yeah, without further ado, we'll get started. So just a quick note on the companies that are sponsoring this event. First up is Chameleon. Chameleon helps your product and users sync in sync and drive product success. They really help on better onboard new users, inform customers about product changes, and capture that really essential feedback at key moments. Toucan specializes in data storytelling to help product teams with a no-code solution that allows anyone, so regardless of technical literacy levels, to build differentiating analytics for users quicker and cheaper than you could with custom development. So why are we here today? We want to talk about customer centricity. It's a big thing that we heard from you guys, and that is a big focus for both Pulkit and Charles, who are kindly speaking today. We noticed that customer-centric companies who really focus on delighting their users are consistently more successful than those who are very product-focused. And it may be obvious, but it really does sort of give you that ever important, why as a product leader. And ultimately, we shouldn't forget what SaaS stands for. It's software as a service, and that service part is a strategic differentiator to set you apart. And it's really important to remember that at the end of the day, the goal is to provide value for those that are paying you, not just to achieve some financial target. So this doesn't mean by any means that we give up a focus on acquisition. It's actually quite the opposite. And we think that true customer centricity really encompasses all your needs, as a business, meaning that you're providing the right value to the right people at the right time. So I'm going to stop talking now because we have two product leaders with us today who both have a lot of valuable insights to share. So I'm going to hand off the mic to Pulkit so he can introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what customer centricity means to him, as well as some of the most important things that he thinks our audience should consider when endeavoring to be more customer centric in 2021.
Great, thanks, Varun. Hi, everyone. My name is Pulkit. I'm calling in from New York, Brooklyn. It's quite sunny here today, which is really nice. I grew up in the UK and otherwise live in the Bay Area. And yeah, I'd love to talk about customer centricity. I think, now, especially today, when we have everyone being remote and everything happening through technology and through screens, it's really hard to connect with companies and connect with brands because in many ways, we've lost that human touch. And so how can we be more humane in this world? Because empathic connection and emotion are still really important in us understanding if we enjoy using software, if we find success. So I think as we look to scale and as the world continues to be more kind of remote first, I think it's really important to be customer centric and bring that as the focus area for your company and product. And that includes finding ways to leverage emotion and connecting with emotion, not going only with numbers and kind of being completely, I guess, reason and logic oriented, but also emotion and sentiment oriented. And enabling feedback processes where people can express themselves and share with you and your company or brand how they feel. And I think part of that is also going to be finding a metric to think about and define for yourself. How are you going to track customer centricity, be able to measure it and improve it? So yeah, those are some of the things that I think about for, in why customer centric is important. And I'd love to hear Charles's perspective, and I'm sure we'll get into more of this as we go through the slides.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm unmuted. Thank you, Pulkit, and I really agree with what you just said. So here, hello, I'm Charles. I'm a CEO CPO of Toucan, calling from Boston, where I'm living since 1 year right now. For me, customer centricity starts first by knowing your customers, knowing who you are selling to, knowing your personas, knowing your users. I would say that if you want to be customer centric, first is who are your users, who are you selling to? And I say that because for us, I think we not made the mistake, but it's not a mistake, but something that we iterated because at some point we were focusing on one specific customers and another point we were focusing on another, and it was not clear what was the main focus we had. And since we decided to have this focus on who are we selling to and what's the primary user between the end user, the we call it the practitioner on our side, it's totally different. So first know your personas and justify what you will build in terms of features against what will attract new customers, what will make you upsell existing customers, or what will make reduce your churn. And I'd say another thing regarding what it means for me, customer centricity, is when you drive your roadmap, because I'm working closely with the CTO and the dev team, I have often some kind of tech push. And I would say, don't have your roadmap driven by tech or refacto, but by customers' needs. For me, that's a very true essence of customer centricity. And lastly, I would say focus on data and have everything you do measured against an impact you want to have for your customers. So that's what it means for me. I would say in brief, before we deep dive in terms of customer centricity.
Well, thank you guys so much. It's a nice introduction. And I know there's sort of so many places that we could go with this conversation, and can't hope to encapsulate everything in just an hour. But we'll do our best. So you guys mentioned a lot of things there, and I know that for me, as someone with much less experience, when I think of customer centricity, it's hard to determine where to start. And we've had some really enriching conversations that have led us to think that, well, data might be the best place. And both, again, from our registrants and from you guys, data can and should really act as a compass to know where to start. And it's not really a choice anymore in the modern era. We have to be data driven to be successful, at least to some degree. And when it comes to being customer centric, I know this certainly holds true because data is helping us to make better decisions. It helps us keep our customers at the top of our minds to know where they're dropping off, why they're coming to us in the first place. And it really helps us in roadmap prioritization as well. So we're a bit better able to understand their needs, deliver the value that we now understand they're looking for, and empower them with meaningful insights. Because once a customer buys, it's again hard to get them to actually engage and to stick around to provide that continuous value. So Pulkit, I think I'll kick this back to you, the question. A lot of what we've heard is that product plans can often fluctuate based on whose voice is the loudest, which can obviously be suboptimal. So how do you think data might make it easier to make decisions? And maybe you could give some examples as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've all experienced, product roadmaps being shaped by loud voices. I think one thing I want to remind everyone is that we're already using data for product roadmaps. Now, remember, it's not just quantitative numbers, but actually information that you're hearing from customers through on sales conversations, support conversations, and everyone has their own perspective. So there's already an implicit use of data in road mapping, but the key thing is it's implicit. It's not explicit when you're not kind of visualizing it or noting it down. And so what's happening is that maybe, for example, the founders have one perspective and they're making decisions based on their intuition, which is collected from all of these experiences and interactions with customers, with the market, etc. And actually, by kind of making it explicit, explaining why the decisions are made or sharing that data in a format with everyone, just reduces the risk that you might be unduly influenced, or that you haven't, reviewed all of the aspects. So I'll give one example. So we ran a beta program launched when we were launching our microsurveys functionality, which allows, it's kind of meta because you can actually collect, it's a way to collect feedback from customers. But we launched this functionality, and we ran a beta program. And as part of the beta program, we had a shared Google Doc where we invited all of the beta participants to be able to collaborate, and we gave them a little format, and they could write down feedback as bullet points. Really, really simple way to collect feedback and make data explicit in terms of what we do. And what we saw there is that what we had thought were very simple issues that we kind of waved our hands at. We're like, oh yeah, we know that this is an issue. We'll fix this, not an issue. We were looking for deeper insights or bigger issues, but we found that consistently some of the smaller issues that we kind of semi-ignored were at the forefront of our customers' minds, and those were the points that they kept referencing or plus oneing. And so that reoriented our perspective to be like, actually, this is the thing that customers care about. Even though we might consider this minor and we are looking for bigger problems to solve, this is the thing that we should start with. And this, by making that data explicit, by having it written down, by being able to be shared easily across the team, we could more easily build a consensus on like which features or which improvements to focus on in that beta. So I guess in summary, what I'm saying is that there is always data being used. You just have to think about what is implicit and explicit, and can you make the implicit data more explicit so you get a shared understanding and reduce the risk of making missteps or wasting time as you're building functionality.
I really like this your approach here, sharing like very pragmatic, very simple way to collect feedback. And where I completely agree with you is that when we say data here, it's not data only the quantitative thing; it's more the analytical approach that's very important and mandatory to build consensus and to build alignment. In the past webinar that you can replay I said that for the attendees, we discussed a lot about alignment when you do the road mapping, but it is very key that you build this to align all the stakeholders so that the loudest voice is not the the voice that has the final word. And this is very important because you have, like you mentioned, sales stakeholder that might be losing a contract if we don't do something very short term, but we have the marketing, the marketing who says that the space is too crowded, we have to differentiate. So what should we be building for the next year? And here, using this very normative approach where you say, okay, I want to listen to my customers, but also listen to the market, because you can speak to your customers, that's good, but you don't have to listen only to your customers, you have to listen to your market. This is, I would say, one of my main points regarding this phrase, using data to find your customer-centered focus, is talk to your market and not only to your customers, because some of your customers won't be the right, I would say, customers in the long term. Maybe you have today in your customers early adopters, people that are here for some specific features, but maybe the broader market that will make you very successful is not in the cohorts that you have in your customer base today. So here I will extend the customer centricity theme around something more broader. It's know your persona, know your market, and find an analytical way to collect information, usage data, customer analytics, to after prioritize your roadmap. And here, one of the very pragmatic thing we use here, it's the RICE methodology. I'm sure you know it's a way of prioritize, because road mapping, it's making choice and priority and choosing a timeline for all these choices. And the basic way to score your different opportunities, because each development topics, it's an opportunity. It's to have the analytical approach to say, okay, for one specific feature, what's the reach of that feature? So am I doing this for one customers or for 100 customers, for 1 million customers? What's the impact? Is it something that's low impact, like very nice to have? Is it like a very high impact because it's a core differentiated feature? What's the confidence of developing this feature? I really know the path to victory, or this is still very unclear how we will get from 0 to 10. And overall, what's the effort to build the story, to build the feature? And the effort is, okay, that's very simple. We can do it in one sprint, or that's something that will require a lot, a full development squad for 3 months. And doing that, you can, that's the dream of financial people, but you can have an Excel file and that will help you identify what's the thing you might be considering doing first, and what the things you might don't want to doing in the short term. And I really like that, because for me it's a very good way to be very customer centric, because you think about the reach to your customers, the impact for your customers, and coupled with more internal metrics, which is confidence and effort. So I think it's a good way to bridge your customers where you want to go and your internal resources. So that's yeah.
I thought I could maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just wanted plus one that RISE framework. We've been using it recently. So whenever we have a simple Airtable form where anyone can submit a feature suggestion or a product improvement idea. And in that, we've built in those kind of RISE pieces. So it's like, you can score everything from, 1 to 5 and, on how broad it is or how narrow it is for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. And then afterwards, the product manager reviews all of those submissions. And then we add, validation, we adjust some of those as we kind of get input from engineers. So we've been enjoying that. And, if you've had any experience with that, or if you've run it in a different way, I'd love to learn how tactically you implement RISE. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
For me, or that's for or it's for the chat?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, if anyone, any of the participants are using the RISE framework, I'd love to also hear how they're using it, or if they've had any feedback. And if you have any feedback, great. But I was just wanted to share how we use it.
On our side, I think we do kind of the same that you described, and we couple that to what we call the impact mapping way of organizing the product roadmap. Is start with the impact, and that's why I think it's very related to customer centricity. Is you start with the impacts you want to achieve for your customers. That's something we will discuss after, also how you can be more outcomes and oriented and not output oriented. But start with the impact. I want to increase conversion rate for a specific flow by 20%, because I want them to achieve more in my platform. And then you start with the impact, then you scope for which persona you do it, and then you say, okay, what can I do to achieve this impact? And this is where you don't start with the means, but you start with the objective, and you start with the impact. And what is very good with that is the impact is related to an objective, like you said, at the beginning. It helps you have like customer metrics that you will monitor, follow, and that you will try to improve. So yes, if I can send you some links regarding customer impact mapping, but that's for me something we also use coupled to the RISE to prioritize the roadmap.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely look out for those resources and think about how we can use impact more. And I think Jean-Marie also mentioned that maybe they think that it's not super efficient for roadmap. So we'd love to hear more information about that. Please share if you have anything with the group. But anyway, back to you, Varun.
muted there.
You're muted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll definitely address that. So Jean-Marie, if you have anything else to say, we'd love to hear it. But you guys touched on so many awesome pieces there. One thing that stood out to me is we talked a bit about aligning all stakeholders and really creating that culture around data. So I'd love for you each to touch on that a bit more and maybe give us some ideas of how you can build a data culture, not only internally, which is obviously important, but also externally, so that you're really allowing and empowering your users with their data. So maybe Charles, you can start there.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just looking. I was trying to find a link for impact mapping. I will send you guys the link for impact mapping after. I haven't found it in my notes right now. So can you repeat your question, Varun? Is it regarding use data culture? And
yeah, so just some tips for our attendees. I think a lot of the questions that we got prior to the webinar were around aligning everyone and making sure that you have a strong data culture, both internally for your team and externally for your users.
Yeah, I would say here what's very important is in all, like you said, the culture, and start with all the framework that will make you data driven, that will make you obsessed with the data. On our side, what we do is that when we do the road mapping, we use this impact mapping strategy, and doing so, we have like very clear objectives of key metrics that we want to improve for specific flows into the product. And after what we do, we identify this metric, we identify the way we will compute them, and then we have this big dashboard that everyone can follow. And on our weekly meeting, this is the main things we follow on a very weekly basis. And everything we do it to improve these metrics. So we are steered with these big goals, big objectives that we have set once a semester, once a quarter, or once a year, depending on how big is the project. And doing so, what's very important is that it provides alignment, and doing so you also save a lot of time and money, because you don't do the things that are not related to improving that key metrics. So I would say here you have to be kind of stubborn, if that's an advice I can tell. Stubborn but flexible. I would say stubborn on vision, flexible on execution, because you always have things that come up along the way, and you don't want to be in your tower without listening to your without listening to your customers. But I would say you have to hold the direction very clearly, and have this north star of your key metrics very on a daily basis visible for everyone. So I would say build everything around these key metrics, and then and use your product analytics to do that, and have the product analytics at the heart of your decision making. You're muted, Varun.
Pokit, I know you have some wonderful thoughts here as well. So I'd love to hear from you on either response to Charles or some of the key things around building a data culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably no one disagreeing that we want to build a data culture. I think that's probably everyone's on the same page. Of course, it helps bring meritocracy, transparency, trust in your team and with your customers. So maybe I can just touch a little bit about how we are trying to do that. I think there's always scope for improvement. So internally, giving folks access to tools where they can view data. So that's like a really simple thing, like your event analytics, maybe your revenue analytics, maybe your top of funnel marketing analytics, just making that broadly accessible to everyone. So if someone has interest, making sure that that's, they can view the data. I think having a good way to track data and a good implementation strategy. So one tool that we've been using recently is called Iteratively. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is basically a way to organize your data schema for tracking and make sure that your tracking plan is validated and implemented correctly. So when you're shipping features, that you're actually making sure that there's analytics tracked with those features and that is validated, and there's a clear schema for everyone to see. So instrumentation is critical. We also use a tool called segment.com. This is a kind of a data platform which allows you to centralize all of your data in one place and then feed that out onto all of your other tooling. So those are some ways that allow us to track data and give access to data.
And we do this. Sorry, I interrupt you because we do the same regarding when you ship a feature. You set all the trackers to make sure that you will know how to iterate on the feature, or if you will know to kill the feature. I will, maybe that's a question I can ask. How many of you have already like killed a feature or decommissioned a feature of your product? To be honest, we have done it like once or twice on the thousands of hundreds of features, and you know what? That costs a lot of money to maintain these very little features that you have built in the past, and because you don't realize that you can kill them and accept the sunk costs. But you don't know if you should do it because you don't have the data to assess it, and that's something we today do, is that add these measurement points and accept that at some point this feature might disappear. That was an experiment, and we are fine with that, because in the past 5 years we have killed too few features, and they cost a lot in terms of maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful to kill features, right? Because there'll always be somebody using it, and somebody will want it, and it may lose you some customers. So it can be hard, but we recently killed functionality where some folks were using it, but the functionality wasn't reliable enough for us to throw away around. So even though some people were using it, we felt like it wasn't built out enough. It didn't have enough like functionality to actually enable people to be super successful. So we killed that, and we had to deal with support requests of like, hey, why is this no longer available? But having a good answer. So I recorded a video where I explained why we decided to kill this feature and what the reasoning and rationale was. And we had that available to send to customers who asked about it. So I think that allowed a bit more empathy to be built because they understood the thinking behind it and why we were doing it. So I think if you're going to kill a feature, and I think we actually I think we have a blog post which we can share about how to kill features and offboard people from those features and how to use that as another opportunity to re-engage them with core parts of your product. And maybe we'll share that afterwards. But yeah, so I think those are really great ways on internal, building culture, on data-driven culture internally. I can talk a little bit about a couple of things we do externally to build a data-driven culture. So on all of our kickoff calls, we really emphasize this. Charles mentioned this point around being outcome oriented rather than output oriented. So especially in our space, which is relatively new, people building and iterating on user onboarding, often folks are very output oriented. They're like, we just need to build a welcome tool. We just need to build a feature announcement. We just need to build something that shows people how to do things. Well, that's all fine and well. You can build and deploy that, but does it work? Do your users appreciate that? Are they happy with that? And I think bridging that gap can be tough. So we try to coach and educate folks even from the sales process, like what are the metrics you care about? We have a evaluation plan in a sales deal. We define with the customer a mutual evaluation plan where we outline what are the key things you actually care about upfront. So that's again trying to be kind of applying that methodology to even evaluations. We do it in kickoff calls and all of our kind of QBRs reviews. We look for what is your goal? Are you assessing success towards that goal? We also encourage people to make sure that the data that Chameleon collects is connected to their systems. So that's another simple, but well, I don't know if it's simple, but it's a common breakpoint where, okay, well, our customers are using Chameleon, but they don't fully connect Chameleon to their database. So the data sits in a silo. And when it sits in a silo, it makes it harder to access. It makes it harder to be part of existing workflows. So that's another thing we encourage is like, okay, well, connect Chameleon to your database. So all of the data we collect is merged with your other data. And then if you're already using a BI solution, for example, to assess what's going on, you can use that and assess Chameleon data. So that's another way we try to encourage people to be data-driven, again, to have access to data. So I don't know, those are some simple tactical things. I don't know how relevant it is to everyone, but generally giving access to data is really key. Make sure it's tracked is really key. And then trying to, have by default people starting to use data and encouraging those, whatever touch points you have to use those is ways that I think we can build that culture.
And accessibility is key here because this is how you provide alignment. If at some point you have the sales team that don't get why you are working on features A, and if your customers doesn't understand why you are working on feature A or B, and another group wants feature C, if you give access to that data, and data is not only the metrics you want to improve, but all the mechanism that help you prioritize, that will save you a lot of conversation. Should we maybe answer, I don't know, the question from Jean-Marie? He had good question. He said that, and I agree, RISE is not the silver bullet. It's just a first approach for prioritization, but how you do prioritize between operational bugs and new features, and both are for customers. I would say here, Jean-Marie, you have to, I would say, have a strategy regarding how you want to organize things. For example, me as a CPO, I set a policy which is zero bug policy. And zero bug policy means that all the bugs are handled on a weekly basis, and they are nearly always, I would say nearly, because depends what's the bug, what's a fixture, what's a bug, or what's an improvement. But for something that you have shipped and that you guarantee support, it should be working. Because in my strategy, quality is key. Is key for adoption, is key for retention, is key for the trust that your customers will have in your product. It doesn't mean a thing to add new features if you can guarantee the quality of what you have built in your past years. So my strategy here is to say zero bug policy, provide trust. So every bug that's a very clear bug should be prioritary. And when I say that, it's because usually bugs can be solved in one day. So we had what you call the Monday bug. So we do the retrospective and the weekly rituals on the Monday morning, and Monday afternoon is dedicated to fixing bugs. And usually, if you have this kind of cadence, it doesn't take much than one afternoon for the team to fix that bugs. And after, you have also, you can solve that with your organization of your teams. On our side, we decided to have like two people at the scale we are, two people that are rotating on a weekly basis to handle support and that fix bugs continuously. And this is a lane that we have, and we have the different other lanes dedicated to more new product features, but we have a lane of two FTE dedicated only to fixing bugs on continuously. So I would say you have to have your choice, your strategy, and you have also to build the organization that matches that. Does it answer your first question, Jean-Marie?
And maybe I can pick up.
Yeah, sorry. I think he anticipated our thoughts really well. So Jean-Marie, as I said, we did get that question quite a bit, and it was actually one of the things we wanted to talk about today. So
sorry. Okay. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So yeah, I mean, just to reflect sort of what our attendees have been asking, is that a big part of becoming customer centric is really anticipating and delivering on those new requests, but also balancing it with sort of maintaining the core product. And I just wanted to hand it back to Pulkit because he said something really interesting when we were sort of discussing the topic I think what you called it was the 60-20-20 rule. So I'd love if you could speak more to that. And then, of course, any other thoughts that you have here.
Yeah, so I can't take credit for it. This is something that Sean Clowes, who's product advisor, he's had a really great kind of career being head of growth at Atlassian and then CPO at Metromile and now SVP of product at MuleSoft, shared, which is generally when you're spending time on features, this isn't so much bugs versus features, but really where you're enhancing functionality or developing new features. He said, just spend 60% of the time on core functionality, stuff that your product is your bread and butter. That's why people come to your product. It's the reason it exists. 20% on defensive. So that's when you're responding to changes in the market or changes from competitors that they've introduced. And then 20% on differentiating. So stuff that maybe the market doesn't have, but you can build and innovate on. So that was, for me, when I first heard that a few years ago, it was a bit of a light bulb moment, because it re-emphasized how important core is. I think it's very easy to over prioritize or overemphasize differentiation or defensive features, because especially you might be very sensitive to how the market is reacting or what competitors are doing, but it's really, really important that you're actually spending the majority of your time enhancing and improving your core functionality, core feature set.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because based on what, and it's related also to the bugs, is be aware that everything you build will require maintenance in the long run, and you are with limited resource, and everything you do should be targeted in building what your core market is expecting from you. So here I would say you have to have always that in mind and make sure that you are not developing features that are, I would say, on the side and not doing anything on your core business. For example, you are doing a CRM. If you spend time on API integration, onboarding, analytics, and you don't do anything on the flow of the deals, the leads, the contacts, and everything you can do as a core CRM, you are losing yourself. So make sure that you have your core focus in mind, and because at the end you still need to deliver on everything, I would say you should have the build versus buy framework, for example, on our side. And I can take for an example. Sorry, let's start with maybe with the quote, because I like that quote. Is, I would say, to scale, do the things that don't scale. That's Ray Hoffman who said that, and that's applying to us, because, for example, we are relying on MongoDB as a database, and MongoDB is providing an infrastructure on the cloud Atlas, MongoDB Atlas, that scale natively. And instead of spending time on developing that, we said, okay, let's just buy from them, but just buy their stuff, buy the ability to host data on the cloud, and that can scale very easily, and focus on what we do at best at Toucan, which is, for example, visualization. Okay, so be aware that for each the need you have, you nearly always have a on-the-shelf solution that will help you deliver more quickly with a limited budget and with, I would say, less maintenance for you, so that at the end you can focus on your core feature. I don't know, Pulkit, if you want to add something.
I can if Vern wants me to. You tell me, Vern, you're the boss.
Well, I think this is actually a really good segue first, just to the question that we received of prioritizing between new features for one big customer or fixing issues for long tail customers, and anything on tiering customers. I thought that was a really interesting point. So thank you for bringing that up. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I don't know if anyone has a really silver bullet answer, but here's what we do. So as part of our reach, we will try to use the overall revenue that might be affected. So that's one way we can get there. So if it's like big customers with a lot of revenue versus small customers, we can kind of balance it that way. The other thing that we do is we typically will not prioritize features or feature requests from our self-serve customers. That's something that we reserve for our growth customers. And so we have 2 tiers of customers. The growth customers essentially are committing to an annual agreements with us. The startup customers are on a month-to-month. So we've just decided that because our growth customers are investing with us and willing to commit time with us, we are willing to speed up items in the roadmap if we believe it still meets our prioritization, but we wouldn't do that for small customers. But yeah, otherwise we use the kind of the reach as a way to assess that. But I don't know, I'm curious to hear if anyone else has good solutions to this.
Yeah, I think it's what you mentioned here is what we call it here program, depending on you said programs depending on your tier of your customers, and related also to lanes and efforts you put in that program. You say, okay, in that top tier program, this is my top 5 customers. They are in my customer advisory board, and I want to make sure that they are happy, that they are co-developing the roadmap with me. But I can't do for all my customers. I can do it only for my top X% of customers that pay me a lot and that are happy to invest with us. And then you can say, okay, I am fine that for, like you say, my self-serve on our sites for maybe below a certain revenue or for a certain specific type of customers, we say we won't do anything. We are fine. We are never fine of losing a customer, but say they might churn if we don't do that. That's a risk in our matrix of risks. We are fine with that because at the end you have to, I would say, choose between your left arm and your right arm, and and I would say this the to be fine with that is just to have your plan. There is no good choice. It's just you have to make a decision, make your plan, make your program, and at the end stick to the plan and say, okay, that's how I decided, that's my strategy, and let's stick to the strategy. I would say the good answer is just to say, should I fix the issue for my biggest customer or fix the issue for the long tail, is decide on your strategy and stick to that and be consistent with that strategy.
Wonderful. So I hope that answered all the questions from the audience. We can certainly circle back on that at the end. Again, we do have a dedicated Q&A reserved at the end, but I do want to move on just to address all the other points. So another key theme that we saw emerging time and time again was, unsurprisingly, pricing. So especially when considering product and customer centric growth, this is something that any team has to consider. And at the end of the day, I think, Pulkit, to your point, there's no silver bullet or best price for a SaaS offering, and that doesn't really exist. But we commonly see people undervalue their offerings or have pricing that doesn't match their customers' expectations, needs, or scale. And people play guessing games or literally just copy other people or even avoid pricing altogether. So I think that one thing that has emerged is that when we're considering pricing strategies, we want to consider the customer first. So I'd love for you guys to touch a bit on the importance of pricing in this context. And I know you've each changed your pricing multiple times, so I'd like to know how you've done it to lead with value for your customers and really put that user base first. So maybe I'll hand the mic back to you, Pulkit.
Yeah, it's a good topic. So pricing, I think we all know, is severely under optimized within SaaS, and there's probably a lot of scope for improvements and increases. I wouldn't say we're experts, but we've changed pricing quite a few times. And we've adjusted it based on the number of plans, how much the plans cost, billing periods, functionality in different plans. For one thing, for example, we used to have a plan where it was lower cost, but it would include Chameleon branding. And we realized that actually for our customers to be successful, they don't really want to have convenient branding in their in-product experiences. It's meant to look and feel native. That's part of the value proposition, is that you can build these native looking experiences. So we actually decided that that's just, we don't even want to offer that. So we said like, okay, you're going to have, and everyone gets access to custom CSS. Previously, that styling was separated onto a medium plan, but we said, actually, no, we want you to be successful. We want everyone to have like full styling control. And that's going to be the basic plan will include that. So that was one example, but that basic plan was at higher cost than the less affordable plan, or the more affordable plan with the branding. So that was like kind of one way that we made that decision. So that was kind of oriented around, well, what do we need? What do we think customers need to be successful? And even in terms of our feature differentiation or feature set on different plans, we typically give people access to almost all of the functionality, but at a basic level. And then if they want to be if they're much more sophisticated, they want to do A/B testing, or they want to have multiple webhooks, or they want to connect to bigger enterprise accounts, then they switch onto the bigger plans. But
I would say,
I think,
yeah.
Go ahead, Charles.
No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, one of the key things that we are still working on, and we're trying to figure out, is how can we show our customers a clear ROI so that they know, well, this is the amount that they're paying and this is the value that they're delivering, which I think is a bit of a, a key goal for any SaaS company, if they can very clearly show the ROI between how much someone's paid and how much value you've gotten. So you can do that by maybe showing kind of general like statistics around hours saved or the decisions made, but I think it can often be very unique for each company. For us, it's partly around how many conversions have you driven, or how much engagement have you increased with your users with using Chameleon. So we provide some analytics around that. So for example, if you're A/B testing, or if into completions in terms of flows that you've created, but I think we're still need to find a better connection on ROI there. Did you want to jump in,
The
Charles?
pricing is pricing is very hard, tricky. It's, I would say, we can call it maybe like dark science or dark art. I don't think that a lot of people are I would say happy with the pricing they have so far. You always think that you are living on the table because extracting, because this is where it is very tricky, because you are balance between delivering a lot of value to your customers, but you want to extract that value and convert that value, like you said, in a very monetary thing. Here, structuring the pricing, I would say, same as I said before, it requires a strategy that you want to have. Is it your strategy to offer a lot of the features, but like you said, Pulkit, but that are very basic, without not for expert needs, and then make pay for I would say more advanced usage? And why it could be a strategy? Because you could say the people that are not advanced will churn, and it's just nice to have for them. And the real customers I want are the people that are advanced, and for them we deliver much more value, and they are much more aware of the value that we deliver. That's why they will pay. That's one strategy. Another strategy would say, I want to have as much people as possible paying for my software. So here you could say you start to make them pay very early in terms of feature sets, but at a smaller price level. So here, I would say no silver bullet, no magic answers. I would say it depends on what's your strategy in terms of go-to-market, in terms of what's the competition in your market also, because value-driven pricing is, you can't ignore your market. If you are the only one offering something for free, or the only one offering something that you pay, that you make them pay for something in your market, if you are the only one, it will be not the right thing to do, I would say. So listen to your customers, that's one thing, but your customer will never tell you, I will pay it for that. Or very honest customers, but that's very rare to identify this kind of customers. So define your strategy in terms on what do you want in terms of user base and in terms of what are the pros and cons of doing something very specific in terms of pricing, and then I would say stick to it and make sure that it's very consistent with the rest of your branding, positioning, and overall company strategy.
One thing that I can add on to that, I mean, you said, Charles, listening to your customers, but I think they may not tell you whether they'll pay or how much they'll pay, but it is important to collect feedback on how much value they're finding from different features. So you can use, micro surveys in the product or something like that. But, when someone activates on a feature, how valuable was it? How happy are they with features? So that can at least start to help you understand which features are well liked and used and wanted. And you can also delineate based on the type of user that's responding to that. And there's a really good study by by Superhuman around product market fit, where they assessed different groups of users based on their demographic or persona, and those different groups had really strong preferences of different feature sets, and they realized they had product market fit with one group of people, but they didn't have fit with a different group of people. So even understanding your personas, which keep coming back to to how Charles mentioned, it's really important to know your users. So understanding the personas and which personas appreciate and value which feature sets can be really helpful. So it's a really simple tactic for that is just to start to use microservices in the product to try and get that feedback.
And what you say, that's why I mentioned strategy, because as you may you have for sure a different set of personas. You have to decide, okay, my main personas, this is this one, I will build the pricing for this kind of users. And it's not a problem if the other set of users, I am not optimizing my pricing and I'm not optimizing anything for them.
Yeah, and actually, I think we there's a lot of like on freemium as well. You kind of mentioned about plans that give basic access, and we recently did another webinar on freemium and wrote a lot, a detailed case study or post around how to set up freemium. So if anyone's considering offering a free option for their as part of their pricing, Kirsty's just sent a link. That could be really interesting as well.
Yeah.
That mute button's getting me today. We actually did receive a question on this, guys. So someone's interested in specifically some of the challenges that either of you've encountered when changing pricing models, notably addressing your existing users or grandfathering them on plans, and if you've made any mistakes that others can learn from.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just grandfathered everyone. We just didn't want to deal with the hassle of pushing people to upgrade necessarily. We have run campaigns where if we are basically, for example, removing a pricing tier, we've told people, hey, we're going to be removing this pricing tier. If you're interested on this day, if you're interested, buy it now, we'll grandfather you in, but you won't have access afterwards. So that was actually, whenever we've done that's been relatively successful, but we've kept people grandfathered in.
Yeah, and I would say here, depending on at what stage you are, but I would say think always to your goal and where you want to go, and not only on your past success. So the customers that you have today might not be the customers that will make you successful in the next year or in the next 5 years. So be more, I would say, obsessed on your vision and where you want to go than being, I would say, slowed down by your existing customers. So be comfortable with that. That's hard. I would say that's hard, and we I would say killed in the past once or twice part of our customers just by discontinuing tiers offering. That I would say that's hard, but at the end, think about when you are working on your landscape. You are cutting some very good part of the trees, but at the end, what you want a bigger trees and a tree that goes in the direction you want. So that's an analogy I like, because every time I'm making like a hard decision, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just here. I'm just managing my garden so that it grows where I want it to grow.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. So I do want to leave just the last few minutes here for a little Q&A session. So again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat there. One that we got is, I don't know if this was geared specifically at Toucan, but if our users or attendees don't have the budget to consider an external build vendor to help build out the new features, how do you guys assess whether something will actually be worth it? And are there any partners that sort of help with that sort of evaluation? Charles, maybe I'll let you take that first.
I would say measure the impact, assess the impact first for your customers, and depending on the impact and after the prioritization, assess the cost of building in-house or building with a vendor, and do your ROI, because at the end, for me, it shouldn't be a problem of budget. It's a matter of ROI always. There is no too high budget for something that delivers impact and value.
Agreed. Polkit, anything to add in there?
From my experience, it's almost always cheaper to buy and build, unless you have it's a very limited functionality and it's a one-off process. You're not going to invest in it in an ongoing manner. But the fact that SaaS services improve functionality over time and gravitate towards what the market needs and what the best practices in the market are, typically it's always cheaper over the long term to buy. But of course, if you're cash poor and time rich, then it might make sense to build.
Yes. And I think it was Clea that asked that question. We do also have a entire webinar on build versus buy, so I'll send that in the chat as well. So maybe time for one last question here before we wrap. So Polkit, you talked a little bit about collecting feedback at churn. Could you speak a bit to the specific or mechanisms around doing that efficiently and how you guys capture that?
Yeah, I mean, a churn point is, high intent, and it's a good chance to collect some feedback. Now, you can collect it before the churn event or after the churn event. Before the churn event, you're much more likely to get it, even though it can be annoying. So right before someone's churning, for example, if they're hitting cancel plan, you can offer them, a survey like, can you explain why? So some companies won't even let you cancel automatically. You have to contact support, etc., which I think is a bit too much. But at least collect some feedback and categorize it or have free form so you can understand why people are leaving. That's really, really valuable. You can also offer some kind of gift card if they're willing to jump on a quick call where you can dig a bit deeper, because some of those forms are so superficial and high level in terms of the responses you get. You can also do it post churn. So, why not if you can? One example is we have a Chrome extension. If someone removes the Chrome extension, uninstalls it, you can open up a tab. So we open up a tab with a form, just asking them, very simply, why did you uninstall? So I think finding opportunities where you can engage pre-churn, post-churn to collect feedback can be really helpful in informing your product decisions.
Wonderful. So I don't see any other questions to address here. If you guys have some closing points, feel free to add them in. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
No, it was just a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Charles, for sharing your insights. And
Yeah.
I think we're all in it together, figuring it out. So looking forward to the next webinars that we do.
Thank you, Polkit, and thank you, Farron, for the moderation.
Yeah,
and thank you for the attendees for the questions.
Yep. So thanks, everyone. Again, you will be receiving the recording both on the landing page or in your email. So feel free to come back and check out this content again. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions that you may have. And we really appreciate you taking the time today. So thank you.